Welcome back, Star Wars fans. In a previous video, we took a deep dive into some incredible vintage Star Wars magazines. Not long after that video went live, I was thrilled to be contacted by a fellow collector who had seen it. He told me he had a stash of vintage magazines that he thought would be perfect for my collection. Knowing from my channel that I'm passionate about preserving these pieces of Star Wars history, he wanted them to go to a good home. After a few messages back and forth, we reached a fantastic agreement. He offered me an incredible deal on the lot, not for profit, but because he valued the care I put into my collection. And just like that, I had an amazing new addition to my archive. But what makes this truly special isn't just the magazines themselves, it's the connection they represent within the Star Wars collecting community. Knowing that people are watching, appreciating these videos, and wanting to contribute to preserving these relics is incredibly rewarding. So with that in mind, let's explore some vintage magazines and take a closer look at the history we're preserving. And what better place to start than the very beginning, when Star Wars was still a brand new phenomenon. One of the earliest mainstream publications to cover Star Wars that I've come across is this Time magazine, dated May 30th, 1977. This article was published just 5 days after Star Wars premiered. Let's take a look at what the world was saying as Star Wars was just beginning to make its mark on pop culture history. This article explores how Star Wars became a groundbreaking cinematic phenomenon. George Lucas, a filmmaker with a passion for adventure and myth, faced skepticism from Hollywood, but pushed forward to create a space fantasy unlike any before it. As the article continues, it describes the quirky droid duo of R2-D2 and C-3PO, along with the towering Wookiee Chewbacca, and describes how these characters were destined to become instant icons. It discusses that the real innovation came from Star Wars' revolutionary special effects. Lucas and John Dykstra's team used cutting-edge motion-controlled cameras, surpassing the breakthroughs of 2001: A Space Odyssey in both complexity and scale. In addition, it discussed how the cast often found themselves acting against unseen effects, while Lucas, more comfortable crafting visuals than directing actors, shaped the film with meticulous precision. Despite the challenges, Star Wars delivered an exhilarating, optimistic adventure, one that captivated audiences and left them eager for more. And with Darth Vader still at large, it was clear this was only the beginning. Even this early in the game, Star Wars was set to leave a lasting mark on pop culture. The film had yet to prove itself at the box office, but those who had seen it recognized its potential to reshape movie-making. What seemed like a simple space fantasy was, in reality, the beginning of something much bigger. As excitement for Star Wars continued to build, magazines devoted to sci-fi and fantasy began to take notice. Magazines like Fantastic Films, which offered even more details about the Star Wars universe. The first issue we will examine is issue 18 from September of 1980. In it, we have an interview with both Gary Kurtz and Phil Tippett. Gary Kurtz reflects on his journey from a film student at USC to working on Roger Corman productions and eventually co-producing Star Wars. He shares the many hurdles faced during the production of The Empire Strikes Back, including a devastating fire that destroyed a soundstage they had planned to use. Kurtz details the immense complexity of the film's special effects, from planning and storyboarding to execution, as well as the challenges of shooting on multiple sound stages and locations simultaneously. Norway in particular proved to be grueling for the cast and crew, with some members even suffering third-degree frostbite. He also touches on the logistical struggles of set construction, labor shortages, and how merchandising, particularly the success of Star Wars toys, helped finance the sequel while keeping fans engaged. Beyond behind-the-scenes production, the magazine also features an interview with Phil Tippett, a pivotal figure in bringing the creatures of The Empire Strikes Back to life. Tippett's mastery of stop-motion animation and creature design added a unique realism to the galaxy far, far away. And if fans wanted to experience a piece of the film at home, the magazine also included a rather exciting offer, an advertisement for an 8mm reel featuring 8 minutes of Star Wars footage. It was available in 3 versions: a budget-friendly black and white edition showcasing special effects shots, a color reel with the same effects, and for those willing to pay a premium, a full-color version with sound, allowing fans to relive the spectacle in their own homes. Showcasing these kinds of products and advertisements is especially fascinating to me, as they offer a glimpse into a world that no longer exists. The idea of owning a full 8 minutes of Star Wars footage and projecting it at home carried a certain thrill, an excitement that feels almost electric. In today's fast-paced, on-demand world, that sense of anticipation and novelty has largely faded. These are truly relics from another time, capturing a moment when even a few minutes of film could feel like holding a piece of the magic itself. The popularity of The Empire Strikes Back was undeniable, and Fantastic Films wasted no time capitalizing on it. Just 1 month after their previous issue, Star Wars once again took center stage as the cover story of issue 19. This time, the magazine featured interviews with several key cast members, including Frank Oz, Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Peter Mayhew, and Billy D. Williams. I won't be diving into each of these interviews, as much of the information is well known by now. However, for those interested, each of the pages are showcased here, so feel free to pause and read. It's fascinating to look back at these magazines and see Star Wars at the height of its original theatrical run before home video was widespread, when publications like this were one of the few ways fans could get an inside look at their favorite films. With that, let's move on to the next magazine in our journey with Fantastic Films issue 20 from December of 1980. In this issue, Fantastic Films delves into one of the great mysteries of the Star Wars universe at the time, the enigmatic Clone Wars. With little more than a vague mention in A New Hope, speculation ran wild about what this conflict entailed and how it shaped the galaxy. This article explores those early theories, imagining battles and character dynamics that would not be fully understood until many years later. Looking back, it's fascinating to see how fans and writers tried to piece together a history that had yet to be revealed. By April of 1982, anticipation for the next Star Wars installment was reaching a fever pitch, and Fantastic Films devoted an issue to speculating on what was then titled Revenge of the Jedi. With little information available, fans debated the biggest mysteries. Was Darth Vader truly Luke's father? Who was the other Yoda spoke of? And could Han Solo be saved? It's a fascinating time capsule of the excitement and uncertainty leading up to the final chapter of the trilogy. By July of 1983, Return of the Jedi had completed the trilogy, and Fantastic Films took a deep dive into the production with an interview featuring producer Howard Kazanjian. With the film now out in the world, this issue reflected on the challenges of bringing the epic conclusion to life, offering behind-the-scenes insights alongside a stunning collection of movie stills. From thrilling action sequences to the emotional final moments, it captured the excitement of seeing Star Wars come to a close, at least for the time being. With that, we move away from Fantastic Films and into something a little different. The July-August 1980 issue of Prevue, a magazine I have to admit I wasn't all that familiar with. But that's part of the fun of diving into these vintage publications. You never know what hidden gems you'll come across. Let's take a look inside. Stepping into the pages, we find ourselves just before the release of The Empire Strikes Back, with the magazine marking May 17, 1980, as E-Day, the result of 3 years of meticulous planning and preparation. Empire was set to launch with one of the most aggressive promotional campaigns Hollywood had ever seen, spanning comic books, film trailers, books, magazine features, and an all-out blitz of television commercials. Yet, despite all this marketing, George Lucas's infamous wall of secrecy kept major details under wraps, fueling endless speculation and rumors. The article manages to reveal some hints about the story while confirming that the original cast had returned, with Lucas stepping into the role of executive producer and Irvin Kershner taking the director's chair. Behind the scenes, many of the same artists, effects teams, and designers who helped bring Star Wars to life were once again hard at work crafting this next chapter. There was even a special Star Wars hotline set up, where eager fans could call in and receive personal messages from the cast. Just another example of how The Empire Strikes Back was more than just a movie, it was an event. Next up, we have a magazine I had never heard of before, Questar. This issue from August of 1980 features an interview with Mark Hamill and a spotlight on Don Post's now iconic Star Wars masks. Like many of the other magazines we've covered, This one was part of the massive promotional push surrounding The Empire Strikes Back. While I won't dive too deep into every detail, it's still a fascinating piece of history. So let's flip through a few pages and give anyone interested the chance to pause and read. Stepping into another lesser-known publication, we have Real Fantasy. This one is particularly interesting because it's Volume 1, Issue 1, its very first edition, from August of 1978. At a time when Star Wars was still taking the world by storm, this magazine set out to break down the story, characters, and places of the galaxy far, far away. It's always fascinating to see how early publications tried to analyze and make sense of what would eventually become an expansive universe. Let's take a few moments to flip through the pages and see how they approached it. As you can see, it is quite extensive. Next up, we have something pretty special. Volume 1, Issue 1 of Science and Fantasy Film Classics from the winter of 1977. This appears to be a special collector's edition, released when Star Wars was still fresh in theaters and rapidly becoming a cultural phenomenon. Magazines like this were among the earliest deep dives into the film, offering fans a chance to explore the galaxy far, far away in greater detail. We get some fascinating early interviews with the cast, offering their initial thoughts on the film and its unexpected success. There are also some great photo stills and behind-the-scenes details on the technology that brought Star Wars to life. One particularly interesting article compares George Lucas to J.R.R. Tolkien, examining how both storytellers crafted epic adventures that transported audiences to entirely new worlds. It's a fun look at how early critics and fans were already analyzing Star Wars through the lens of mythology and fantasy literature. This issue also features a showcase of early Ralph McQuarrie concept art, giving us a glimpse into the artistic vision that helped shape the final film. And of course, we can't forget the advertisements, offering a snapshot of the earliest wave of Star Wars merchandise, from posters to collectibles that would soon become highly sought-after treasures. This next one is probably my favorite of these new editions, Screen Superstar from 1977. What makes this issue stand out for me is the incredible selection of images, including some that didn't make it into the final cut of the film. It also features some fantastic artwork that I hadn't seen before, making it a real treat to flip through. Since this is an oversized publication, I'll be including photographs of the pages rather than scanned images. So let's dive into this publication and see what we find. What makes this issue even more unique is that it's entirely devoted to Star Wars. Every article, every image, everything inside comes directly from the original film, making it one of the most extensive publications of its kind. Because of that, this is the only magazine where I intend to showcase its entirety, allowing plenty of time to pause and take in all the details. There's a lot to see here: behind-the-scenes photos, early promotional artwork, and in-depth articles covering every aspect of the film's production. Some images are well known, while others feel like hidden gems from the era. You'll also find insights into the creative process, from concept art to set design, all capturing the incredible effort that went into bringing Star Wars to life. These are some really great images. A great artist rendition of the Jawa attack on R2, this is a great shot as well. I love this image of Chewbacca blowing the head off of a stormtrooper. If I could, I would have a poster of this image. And a look at the remaining pages to finish things up. Next up, we have 2 issues of Space Wars, starting with Volume 3, Issue 3, from July of 1979. This issue claims to uncover the secrets behind Star Wars' massive success and how other films are trying to follow in its footsteps. But beyond that, it also includes some more unusual content, like a rather comical fictional interview with Chewbacca, not Peter Mayhew, but the character himself answering questions as if he were sitting down for a chat. It's a charming little aside that really showcases just how much depth these characters had, even in the eyes of fans at the time. There's also a quirky article about R2-D2 and robot rights alongside some fantastic still images from the movie. The next issue of Space Wars comes from March of 1980, just months before the release of The Empire Strikes Back. The main feature takes an interesting approach, comparing Star Wars to other major sci-fi films of the time, like Alien, Close Encounters, and Buck Rogers, to analyze which ones got it right and why. Another standout article explores the so-called secrets of the Jedi Knights, drawing comparisons between Star Wars and Akira Kurosawa's classic films The Hidden Fortress and Seven Samurai. Along with a handful of other fun articles and insights, this issue serves as a fascinating piece of pre-Empire speculation. Next in line, we have Star Battles from the summer of 1979. At this point, it seems like publishers were seeing just how many variations of Star Wars they could squeeze into a magazine title. But despite the somewhat generic name, this issue still delivers some interesting content, including speculation on the highly anticipated Empire Strikes Back. With the sequel still nearly a year away, fans were left piecing together any clues they could find, and publications like this were more than happy to fuel the excitement. Shifting gears, we come to 2 issues of Space Warp, starting with the fall 1979 edition. You can really see a pattern forming among these magazines. As excitement for the next Star Wars installment reached a fever pitch, speculation ran wild. While much of it is repetitive, each publication found ways to stand out with unique and engaging content. This issue, for example, includes a fun piece imagining a sci-fi crossover where Mr. Spock meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. The summer 1979 issue of Star Warp once again taps into the mounting anticipation for The Empire Strikes Back. As with many magazines of the era, it dives into the magic behind the special effects, giving fans a behind-the-scenes look at how Star Wars was brought to life. It also includes a quirky little article imagining what might happen if Darth Vader crossed paths with Muffy, the robotic Daggett from Battlestar Galactica, a fun example of how pop culture franchises were colliding even back then. Perhaps most intriguing, though, is an in-depth exploration of the Force itself. The article attempts to unravel its origins and mechanics, offering early fan theories on how this mystical energy might truly work. By 1981, Star Wars had cemented itself as a cultural phenomenon, and with the final chapter of the trilogy still 2 years away, speculation was running wild. Stars at War from October of that year dives into the ongoing mystery of what would come next, offering early theories about Return of the Jedi, or, as it was still known at the time, Revenge of the Jedi. It also takes another look at the enduring success of Star Wars, analyzing what made it stand out in the ever-growing landscape of sci-fi cinema. To wrap things up, we have a series of vintage Starlog magazines. While many of these issues are filled with rumors and gossip that have long since been settled, I won't be diving into each one individually. Although some of the other magazines we've explored contain similar speculative content, Starlog had a much wider readership and wasn't as obscure as some of the publications we've seen here. You may have also noticed that I managed to get my hands on another February 1978 issue, which covers the infamous holiday special. Since I've already addressed that in a previous episode, I won't be revisiting it here, but I'm always happy to add a second copy to the collection. Now that we've explored these vintage publications, it's time to get them ready for long-term storage. While I don't have any personal memories tied to these magazines, they offer a fascinating glimpse into the Star Wars phenomenon of their time, and I'm happy to add them to my collection. As with my previous publications, I'll be preserving these by sealing each one in a plastic magazine cover with an acid-free cardboard backer. They'll then be placed in chronological order within my storage bin, locked away and safeguarded for as long as possible. If any of you remember these magazines or owned similar ones, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if anyone knows of an older Star Wars article, predating May 30th, 1977, I'd be especially interested in learning about it. With that, we wrap up another episode. I'm glad you joined me on this nostalgic journey into the past. Until next time, may the Force be with you and keep on collecting.